Sexism, misogyny, shady employers. There are plenty of people we could blame for the gender pay gap when it comes to the corporate setting. But what happens when you bring people out of the corporate setting? What happens when freelance writers remove themselves from the corporate setting and empower themselves to start setting their own rates? You would think that the gender pay gap would close, right? You would think that all other things being equal, the experience, the quality of work, the type of projects being worked on, that people who could set their own rates would all be asking for and therefore receiving pretty close to the same amount. So why aren't we? What we're finding out is that there is still very much a gender pay gap, even in the world of freelance writing, even in a world in which all genders have the power to set and enforce their own rates. There is still a substantial difference between the money that a man brings home and the money that any other gender would bring home. A study out of Harvard in 2018 said the gender pay gap was actually a result of work choices. Work choices. Isn't that kind of like blaming the victim a little bit? It's kind of like saying that, yes, you are making less money, but it's because of the choices you're making, so it's kind of your own fault. A couple of months ago, I saw a post on Twitter from a digital marketer called Oliver Meekings. Now, he was talking about a job that he had posted on Twitter asking for freelance writers. I don't know the details of the job because I never saw the original announcement. But in this particular post, he said that by and large, the female freelancers asked for half of what the male freelancers were asking for. Female freelancers, he said, please increase your day rates. Now that seems so easy, doesn't it? It certainly seems like if every female freelancer would go out and simply double their rates, that we would close that gender pay gap in no time, right? So why aren't we starting to do that? You see, we as a people tend to hear the term gender pay gap, and we think of this evil capitalist sitting in his evil lair with his cat on his lap, and he's petting the cat, and he's laughing as men and women approach him and ask him to please bestow upon them their wages, and he is looking and he is grinning and he is saying, you, 3 years of experience, good numbers, $50,000 for the penis. You, 3 years of experience, good numbers. Oh, you're missing one important part. You get $40,000. We know it doesn't work like that, but that's what we all tend to think. So how does it work? Well, for one thing, this study out of Harvard concluded that men will often apply for jobs they know they do not have the qualifications for. And yet, because of the confidence that they exude, they are often rewarded by getting the job. Women, on the other hand, we're often much more cautious, and we like to know for sure that we have the qualifications before we venture into sending out that proposal. Now, we can get into a whole discussion about how we raise our boys to take risks and get out there and be confident, and how we raise our girls to seek out stability and look before you leap, but that's a whole other discussion. The messaging is important. The messaging is certainly part of it, but that's not all of it, and it's a very tiny piece of it. As a freelance ghostwriter, I was content for most of my career to just sit back and be an invisible author. This changed in 2020 when I decided to start building out a much more public brand. And part of this public brand included hosting Q&A rooms every week on a social media app called Clubhouse. It started off as just me fielding questions for about an hour or two with new authors who were looking to get published. Eventually, another ghostwriter, a male ghostwriter, noticed the room and started coming in, and we struck up a friendship. And I actually ended up inviting him after some time to start co-moderating this room with me, so he would help me answer the questions. Well, one day someone came up and started talking about a phenomenon called Imposter Syndrome, which a lot of writers get. In an attempt to relate to them, and I wanted to let them know that they were not facing imposter syndrome alone, I told them a story about how I get imposter syndrome every single time someone asks me to divulge client information. You see, every time I talk to a new prospect about starting up a new contract, I send them all of my writings. I send them samples of things that I've written. I send them publications that I have. I send them blog articles that I have. And yet, even after sending all of this information out, they still ask me for books that I have ghostwritten and or clients that I have written them for. And I have to tell them, I can't do that. I can't divulge that. I'm under legal obligation. And yet they say that they understand, but that imposter syndrome hits me right in the gut. because I know they are looking for proof that I'm the right person for the job. And I know I'm the right person for the job, but I wasn't able to prove it to them based on the writings that I've already sent them. And so the imposter syndrome sits in. Now, my co-moderator responded to my story with a little bit of laughter. He said he could not believe that anyone would ever ask for client information, and no one has ever asked him for client information, that he just sends over his own samples of writing. And I said, well, yeah, of course I do that too. And he said, no, but no one's ever asked me. Whoa. No one has ever asked him. No one in his 30 years of ghostwriting has ever asked him. I thought this was interesting. I thought this was weird. So I started asking other ghostwriters, do clients ask you to jump through hoops and divulge client information before they'll send a contract with you? And right across the board, every male ghostwriter I asked said no. Once they send their blog posts and their articles and their publications, no one asks them for client information anymore. On the other hand, every female ghostwriter I spoke to said yes. Every single time they send their blogs and their articles and everything else, they still get asked about previous client work, and they still end up having to explain why they can't divulge that information. We're not going to get into that tired double standard about how people take men at their word and ask women to jump through hoops to prove themselves. Although that's a whole other discussion. It's just not for this. However, this does play a part into the gender pay gap, and here's how. That imposter syndrome that sets in, that constant need to prove ourselves sets in. Combine the instinct of waiting until you feel qualified before you go after a job with the feeling that you're not qualified because you have this imposter syndrome, and you can start to understand why so many women ask for less money. And yet asking for less money adds to more problems. HoneyBook produced a report in 2019 that said female freelance writers were starting to close the annual income gap, but not the wage gap. So what does that mean? That means that female freelancers are finally starting to make almost as much money as men are every year, but they're doing it by taking on more projects for less money per project. You see, that is a simple numbers game. If you can't charge as much per project, then you have to take on more projects in order to make ends meet. The problem with taking on more projects in order to make ends meet is that you have a whole lot of plates spinning in the air. And I'm not even talking about familial responsibilities and other things like that right now. I'm just talking about juggling clients. By and large, most of the male ghostwriters I know only need to take on 1 or 2 clients at a time. And in fact, one of the ghostwriters I was talking to told me that he was up to 3 clients, and he had never in his 30 years ever juggled that many clients at one time. Whereas my calendar is always filled, sometimes juggling 6 or 7 or even 10 clients at a time. And of course, as it always happens, inevitably, when you are taking on too many clients at a time, something is going to fall through the cracks. There's going to be burnout. There's going to be simple mistakes. And unfortunately, as a woman, we tend to take these mistakes to heart. We don't think of them as a symptom that we've taken on too much. We think of it as a sign that we were never qualified in the first place. So yes, work choices definitely plays a part into the gender pay gap. And there are plenty of things that go into those work choices, including how many projects we have to juggle at a time, how often we have to jump through so many hoops, how confident we feel going after a job for which we are completely qualified, and a number of other things. And you can start to see now how this gender pay gap in the world of freelance writing is really on a self-sustaining cycle. Self-doubt leads to undercharging. Undercharging leads to taking on multiple clients. Taking on multiple clients leads to burnout and mistakes. Burnout and mistakes leads to a deeper self-doubt. So how do we break the cycle? For a long time, I thought that you had to break the cycle by stopping the self-doubt that kicks it off. Have you ever told anyone to stop doubting themselves? It's almost impossible. So instead of aiming for the self-doubt, we have to break the cycle by blocking the burnout. We have to start teaching female freelance writers what the signs of burnout are and how they can prevent it. You see, if they can prevent burnout, then they prevent the small mistakes that kick off a deeper self-doubt. and they can start to see that they can do the job. They are qualified. One of the best ways that I know of to prevent burnout is to be more discerning over the types of clients that we take on. I know that brand new freelance writers have a tendency to want to learn about it all, write about it all, and work with everyone. They don't want to leave any money on the table. They want to take it all in. And that's fine for a while. There's nothing wrong with wanting to try it all out, especially when you're still trying to get to know the type of clientele that you want to work with, the type of writing that you want to do, and how you want your career to look. But eventually you need to take a look at these clients and you need to decide, is this the type of work that is going to feel rewarding, or is this the type of work that after a couple of weeks, I'm going to dread talking to this client? Is this going to be healthy for my career, or is this going to be unhealthy for my mental health? Additionally, with every project, stay in contact with your client, even after the project is over. Not only will this foster a relationship with your client, but repeat work is almost always better and faster than trying to find a new client. Number 3, learn when to turn it off. One of the things that freelance writers love about the idea of freelance writing is that we get to set our own hours and work from home doing what we love to do, which is writing. Unfortunately, we learn really quick that our workday can easily become from the minute we wake up to the minute we fall asleep at night. And because we love what we do so much, because we love writing so much, writing feels like self-care, even though it's not. And we have a tendency to get so involved that even when we do take small breaks, even when we're out with friends or we're playing with kids or whatever it is that we're doing, we're always thinking about our clients in the back of our mind. We've always got our phone on us. We're always checking and even responding to emails. Learn how to turn off. Learn how to close the door and commute back home and leave work at work. Next, make sure you are taking care of yourself, both during your projects and between your projects. Make sure that you are eating healthy. Make sure that you are getting plenty of sleep, that you are taking care of your mental health. Get up and stretch. Take some time with your family. Read. Never forget about your hobbies. Try to remember why you love writing so much. Take care of yourself. If you can keep your mental health strong, then even if you are juggling more clients than you should be, you have a better chance of staving off that burnout than if you were trying to handle it all on your own. If you can, get some help. And finally, take Ollie's advice and increase your day rates. I know that this feels risky. There are prospects who may turn you down, but they're not turning you down because you're not qualified or because you can't do the job. They're turning you down because they can't afford you. Male freelance writers have no problem telling prospects, I'm sorry, but you can't afford me. It's time for other genders to exude that same confidence. It's time for other genders to recognize and adopt that same power.